can get it rolling, I just want to say big fan. Taylor introduced me to. I'm new to the world of motorsports and everything, but whenever people are like, "Yo, you got to check this guy out," I do the digging, I got to do my thing as a sports creator and like look into everything. Dude, you're a hell of a guy. Like,
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
truly, you've got some wins and stuff. Like you're not just doing this thing. You're here.
Yeah, dude.
So it's really cool to see. When was that like moment where you were like, hey, this is what I want to do. I want to be a NASCAR driver. I want to drive, and like like where did that come from? Where did that start?
Well, I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I was always, and my dad being a pit road reporter, I was always surrounded by the sport. And it never was like, he never like forced it upon me or anything like that. He was always just like, figure out what you want to do. And, one day I actually went to like elementary school with a kid who raced, and I was like, I want to try it. And so I did. And, I like sucked to start. Like I was, I started off. I had no idea what I was doing, and so I did it like just like as like a summer thing because it was pretty inexpensive at the time. Just do it during the summer, and whenever I had free time, and it was something to keep my brain occupied because I was just bouncing off the walls all the time. So finally, after like a couple years of doing that, it just clicked, and I started winning races. I started competing in championships, and um, my dad would always like he was always like a little bit he felt like he wanted to make sure that he wasn't like trying to force it on me in any way. So he's always asking me as a kid, like, hey, do you still want to do this? Do you still want to do this? And eventually I just told him like, hey, stop asking. Yes, I want to do this. And so that's when it kind of really started taking off. And so I went into Legends cars and very nearly won a national championship in that. Won the North Carolina Road Course Championship, won a couple track championships. And late model stocks were up next. Won a couple of weekly races. One ended up winning the biggest race of my life in 2015 at the time at Myrtle Beach Speedway. And that was the second biggest late model stock race. I beat guys like Lee Pulliam and other guys who were, super strong in that sport. And then at that point on, it was ran an ARCA and then trucks and O'Reilly, and finally won a race at the national level in 2021 in Miami.
And ever since then, you've just been rolling, just rolling. It's been cool to look into. Obviously, I'm new to this space and everything. I pick up sports kind of like infinity stones at this point. It's like, you know what, I really like this thing, so let's add this to the list of things that we're gonna like watch and cover. And my dad's been a motorsports guy, so he's been trying to like, he's like, dude, you gotta watch. And finally stepped in. I'm in North Alabama. I'm definitely making it down to Talladega. Like I
Yeah.
have to. I have to see it in person. People say like watching it on TV is one thing. What is one of those things that you're just like, yo, in person, this is one of those things that you just have to see it in person because of this.
Well, you can get 90% of the picture when you go to like an NFL game. Like I'm a huge Carolina Panthers fan, have been my whole life. And the only thing you can't convey through TV is like, oh, how loud is the crowd, right? Or how like what's the vibe? And like and they'll do a really good job of showing that, but you can't do that for racing, right? Like you get to the track and there is so much going on from the smells to the seeing the pit crews all work in action, and it's all one big really coordinated show, right? Like they come down pit road, they do their pit stops, and stuff's happening so fast. Like they change tires in under 12 seconds in the Cup Series, and then you see them all take the restart, and you feel the cars like in your chest because that's how loud it is, and it's just awesome. And so that's kind of what you can't experience without going to the track is that what it's like to experience a race in person, and that makes it way different from any other sport in that regard.
It was like the sounds, the smells, everything. It's like it's a whole different environment when you finally get to step out there, get to see it in person, live and in the flesh, and even get to see like some of the energy from the drivers. Like whether it's good energy or bad energy, whether it's something like good that happens or something bad that happens. It may be one of those things you just can't capture on TV, or you just don't. TV does can't do everything justice, unfortunately, as much as we would love for it to do so, it just can't do everything justice. And I get what you mean. Like, dude, I'm hyped. I have to make it to a race. Like, Talladega, it's only 2.5 hours away from me. I got to make it down there. It's just, especially because everybody says, like, that's such a great race. Like, people say it's
Yeah.
such a great one to be at. Like, what makes Talladega, like, such a great one?
Well, Talladega has some of the most. It is a cultural experience. Let me tell you that. So, you gotta walk down the boulevard. You gotta see all the sights and scenes, and you will see a lot of things. A lot of things that I probably can't mention in public right here. Um, but it's. I mean, you'll see mud wrestling. You'll see God knows what down that boulevard. And it's you never that's the best part is you never know what you're gonna find walking down that place, and it's a new adventure every year. So it's awesome in that regard. And it's a one huge party every twice a year. And so it's just really cool that, and it's there's other racetracks that have that too, like the Michigan Speedway infield is really rowdy. So it's just really cool that we have that at multiple racetracks in NASCAR where there's a big old party going on.
Yeah, I love that. You got a favorite track?
Definitely Miami. I have always loved that place. When I first went there, I kind of struggled in the truck series because those things are not meant to run by the fence, and that's all I ever tried to do is I tried to get right up against that fence, and those things would just get sideways. And then so I got to the O'Reilly series, and I was like, man, I got to figure this out. I got to figure out how to drive on the fence. So I went out there, and within 20 laps, I had it all down, and I was like, like after all the years of struggling trying to get up here it's this easy in an O'Reilly car, and then I went on to win the next year I had to start there.
Dude, that's sick. What was the hardest series for you? Like, truck series going all the way through. Like, what was the what was the one that was like, dude, it's getting a little hectic. It's getting a little wicked. This is, like, am I really gonna make it to the next level from here?
Yeah, the truck series for sure was really difficult just because I started off at like the hardest place to start. Well, the easiest and the hardest because my first real truck starts was with Kyle Busch Motorsports, and rest in peace to my goat, Kyle. So I started there, and you're expected to win like right off the jump. And I had zero idea what I was doing because that was my first speedway start. That was my first real start on an intermediate with something that was trimmed out, and so I was kind of figuring it out as I went along. And there's a lot of stuff that I really had to kind of learn really, really quickly, and I had a lot of time in between my starts. And so I ended up getting full time after that year with KBM and running full time with Thor Sport Racing, and won Rookie of the Year against Todd Gilliland and Harrison Burton. And so it was really cool to do that. And I still feel like I was robbed of a couple wins that year. So it just took me a couple starts to kind of get it down. But yeah, trucks were definitely hard. And you think about it, like every wire in your brain tells you, you can't drive in a corner wide open on a racetrack, and you got to go out there and do it because that's what trucks are meant to do. And so that took me like a couple starts to kind of, figure that out and get it right. And so once I got it right, we were really fast.
Like, I figure there's some mental walls, like you just said, that you gotta go through, and it's like, yo, I'm a big bobsled and skeleton fan. Like, got the USA bobsled and skeleton thing behind me. It's my favorite USA team to work with, like doing coverage for, and like that organization. And they've got a couple of screws loose. And like you're throwing yourself down a mountain of ice in a bathtub, basically,
Basically, yeah.
on
I
skis.
watched that. I watched that on the Olympics, and I'm like, you guys are absolutely wild. I
Yeah.
cannot believe that they do that.
You think some of you guys have some, just a couple of screws loose to get in that car and do what you guys do?
Not a couple of us, all of us. So you gotta have a couple screws loose to get in a race car and hop in a corner at 200 miles an hour. And so we're all built a little bit different. We're all a little bit weird, but that's what kind of makes it the best of the best. Is that you got to be a little crazy to kind of do this, and especially really crazy to do it really well.
Yeah. Oh man, watching what y'all do. People talk about, oh, they're just driving left. They're just, dude. There's a lot that goes into it. It's pretty terrifying in some of those moments where you're right next to somebody, and you're trying to like get past them and everything. Like, what are those moments where you're just like, yo, I might. this might be one of those ones where I might not get out of this. You know, like what's running through your head in some of those wicked moments in the race?
The things that come to mind would probably be like speedway races where everybody's getting real crazy because there's times where, the pack is organized and there's times where the pack is not organized. And so you're just like at those moments I'm just like, all right, God, I don't know what you got planned, but I'm just holding the throttle pedal down until something happens. And so and that's speedway racing in a nutshell is that you got to kind of plan your runs and know who you're around and kind of recognize when things might be about to happen before they happen. Only other time is that when it was getting really tough was during the COVID days. We actually had a race because NASCAR was trying to find any tracks that would let us race and have take the risk on of getting COVID or whatever. And so we had to race at Miami because it was one of the few places that was actually open to race. And so, but that was in the middle of June, I think. So it was about 100 degrees outside and lots of humidity. And so I got out of the race car and I was absolutely just soaked. And I was like, all right then. And we had another race because it was a double header. So we had another race the following day. So I had to hydrate immediately and I had to get ready. And so it was wild, but it was a fun time.
Like you guys are athletes. I think that's something that kind of goes, untalked about with you guys. Like you guys are genuine athletes. You know, you're not just hopping in a car and doing the thing, just driving. Like you guys got to be pretty in shape for everything that you guys do. Like it's not easy. Yeah, it's not an
No.
easy thing to do at all.
And you were just talking to LeVar Scott earlier. He's a great example of a guy who's a phenomenal athlete. And he's a great example of that. And so I always tell people that they try and liken it to driving down the highway. So just imagine like you're driving down the highway, but it's rush hour traffic. You know. At 180 miles an hour, and it's also 150 degrees inside your car. So start thinking about like trying to process all that, and we try and make sure we have as the least amount of power steering possible in the car that still allows you to turn the wheel but keeps the maximum amount of horsepower in the engine. And so your arms will get tired after a while, and it definitely you got to be in shape to do this to do it really well.
And doing that for hours, at some point, you're trying not to pass out from the heat, like heat exhaustion. Like you said, down in Miami, it's about 100 degrees down there, 90% humidity, and you've got hundreds of laps going on, and dude, by halfway through the race, you're probably like, dude, I'm just trying not to pass out.
Yeah. And it's, there's a lot of creative solutions to make sure that you kind of stay with it throughout the race. And so, drivers will get ice packs, they'll take water and they'll dump it on themselves. And I actually just learned from Dawson Cram that he'll take like one of those lunchbox ice packs and he'll just stuff it in his fire suit at the start of the race and that stays cool. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to try this next
Oh,
time we go to a hot race.
that's
So it's
dangerous.
yeah, and some other guys they'll use cool suits, which is basically like a little fireproof shirt that runs cold water around you. They're kind of iffy. I don't really trust them, so I don't use them.
I figured, there's the leaking problems from time to time. You don't want to be like you. Yeah, you're gonna end up soaking wet by the end of the race anyway, but you'd prefer to not be soaking wet 5 minutes into the race because your
Right.
shirt breaks. Yeah,
Yeah.
dude, what you guys do is super cool to me. Like it's absolutely wicked, and lots of people try and disrespect about just saying you guys are just going left. To me, you guys are athletes. You guys are putting in work every single day. There's a lot of like strategy that goes into it behind the scenes that people just don't understand. Like it's not just
Yeah.
get out and drive.
Yeah, and it takes a whole village, right? Like it's, you see, you look at, people pay attention a lot to Formula One. They see the driver and they see some of the strategists, but what they don't see is, the thousands of people and the hundreds of people back at the shop that are putting the car together and engineering parts and breaking them and fixing them. And, and that's how NASCAR teams are too. And so you got a group of guys and girls that you lean on, who are, you guys have to be a team. And so you got to have, the right folks who believe in you, and you got to believe in them, and you got to believe in what each other is all doing, because if you don't, then, the team dynamic just falls apart. And so it is a team sport as much as, the drivers are kind of lifted up on this pedestal. There are, hundreds of people that got them there in the first place, from just the team to the sponsors. And so it's one of the better parts of our sport that not is not talked about a lot.
So would you say that's probably the most underrated aspect of NASCAR is the everybody doing the work behind the scenes, the hundreds, thousands of people, that are putting things together. I figure even watching tape on, this is how this race went last year with these sets of drivers. Look, this is what they like to do whenever we get into this situation. Like is there, because like in football, you watch your film. In hockey, you watch your film and everything. You know what I'm saying? Is there like a similar type of deal going on with NASCAR where it's like, we got to watch and see like these are the strategies they like to try and run. Here's how we can counter this, like or is it just like is someone in your headphones like, hey, like we're in this situation, I'm seeing this, let's do this.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of examples of all of that. So the team's job is, like the crew chief's job, the engineer's job is they're going to be looking at and analyzing the strategy data from previous races, and they're going to be going over that and making sure that, hey, this guy took 2 tires and he won. This guy took 4 tires and he won. This guy, took no tires and he won. And so, that's their job. My job is to go over the film. And so, like, a good example I can give of that is I drove a couple races for Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023, and we had a race that was historically not one of my better tracks, at Phoenix Raceway, and I was like, I am figuring it out, and I'm gonna make, I don't care what I got to do, but I'm gonna have a strategy for this. And so I watched, I don't know how many, like 5 or 6 races at least. And I looked at a couple of hours of this program that we have called SMT, which is basically like it's a tool that visualizes the race car, where it is on the racetrack, and the line that you took on a certain lap. And I looked at that for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And I made probably 20 pages of notes for that one race, just making sure that I knew where everybody was at on the racetrack for, practice qualifying in the race, and just kind of understanding. And so I went from, really kind of not having a grasp on the place to going out and qualifying fourth and only missing the pole by a couple hundredths. And so that was kind of like a big turning point for me, because I was like, you know what, all I got to do is put in the work, and all I got to do is make the right notes, and I can figure out just about any racetrack.
That's awesome. That's the cool stuff behind the scenes I feel like more people should know about, because it's not like you just went out there and drove. You studied. You're a true student of the game, of the sport. And it's like, all right, well, I wasn't good here. I'm going to be good here. What do I need to do to get good here? And you put in the work, you put in the hours, you watched the film, you watched everything that you needed to do. I figure you guys have some sorts of like simulators and things like that you guys can hop on and, you know, put in the hours on those as well, figure things out whenever you can't actually get out and drive. And it's just there's so many things behind the scenes, so many different moving parts for the sport that just go untalked about. What's another underrated aspect of the sport?
Yeah, probably the simulator aspect, like you talked about, because NASCAR has tried to kind of dial back the amount of practice sessions that we have. It used to be that you'd get a couple throughout the weekend, and most teams would get a couple tests every year. And so now basically the only tests that happens are tire tests and rookie tests. And so the time that you get on the racetrack as a team and as a driver is really limited now. And so manufacturers have had to come up with ways to kind of accurately simulate what it's like to be on the racetrack. And so they've come up with these multi-million-dollar simulators that are full motion platform, and just have every single feature that you could possibly need in a race car, from the setup to how the car is built. And it's a really involved process, because it's not just as simple as, hey, here's your setup, here's your car, go out and turn laps. You got to actually, you got to have all your cars measured, and you got to know exactly where the center of gravity is. It's a really complex engineering task to get it done. But once you do, it can be really accurate. And I remember I helped out when I was with Jordan Anderson Racing in 2022 in the O'Reilly Series. We were kind of, it was a really fresh team. It had only been operating for about a half a year when I went there. And so they were just kind of getting their simulator program up off the ground at the Chevy facility. and it took us a solid 6 months to get the simulator kind of accurate to real life. And so that's how long it took. That's how much effort it took. And it was one practice session where I had something happen exactly the same way that it did on the simulator. And I'm like, aha, we got it. We finally got it. And so that's just one part that takes a lot of effort and it's a lot of manpower and it's a lot of hours to get it right.
There's a lot of people involved, not just the drivers, and I think that's what's really cool. And the drivers get their credit, and the pit group gets their credit for sure. But I feel like there's lots of folks behind the scenes, like the people helping y'all build the simulators and everything, the manufacturers that are sitting there hours and hours and hours. So many engineers, software engineers, sitting there building this and trying to simulate it exactly or as close to what you're gonna see because, like you said, they're the practice time like on the track is getting limited and every single rep is truly like it's extremely important and I think it's really cool to hear about this stuff because like I've said multiple times I'm very new to the world of motorsports so like to hear about it and everything is just like super fascinating because it's way deeper than just hop in a car drive turn left and go really fast like
Oh,
most
yeah.
people would think it is.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, that is kind of what you see on TV, but like, I remember I was listening to Larson one time because I was trying to figure out what's the secret to Homestead, and I knew that he was one of the best there. And I remember him talking at one of the Homestead Championship races after I had run the truck race. And he was like, "Yeah, I opened up my entry, like widened out my entry on the corner by a couple inches, and that really made a difference with how it ran the center." And I'm like, if this guy is dealing with precision in inches going on the track, like people don't understand how precise. Like that's you're moving your steering wheel like maybe that much, and so it is crazy when you kind of get down to the nitty gritty of it.
Like it's that's fascinating. Like just a couple of inches is the difference and dang I lost this race and I just got all the glory. I mean it changes so much and that's so cool because people are definitely thinking you're measuring in feet and well you need to take this like a couple feet wider. If you're measuring this stuff in inches, dude, I mean the amount of like practice time and reps it took to be able to just like turn just a little bit just to get that extra couple of inches to get around. Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thing too, that I think there's another underrated aspect of, racing in general is just, like going out and seeing grassroots racing. Like I had to start out in grassroots racing, racing Bandoleros, Legends cars, late model stocks, and the whole time, I'm meeting all these folks who, they've got really amazing blue collar stories, right? Um, like guys and late models who they just did that for fun and they had a business that they ran and that the late model racing was kind of their escape to where they could have something competitive and fun. And I think a great example that you could check out is going out to Pensacola, Florida. Um, this I believe it's December is when the race is held. It is the Snowball Derby and it's the biggest super late model race of the year, and it's you'll see probably 5 or 10 NASCAR guys racing that race because they either grew up racing super late models or just looking for something fun to do in the off season. And there are probably 90 cars that show up for about 30 qualifying spots. So it's insane the level of effort that goes into that. And that's just that happens all over the country. Like you got dirt racing in the Midwest, you got dirt racing out west and some pavement stuff, track days, GT cars, and it's so racing is such a rich sport and a lot of people don't really know about it.
That's sick. And since you mentioned the off season, what what do you love to do in the off season? I know you're a big Canes guy. What? Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Congrats. Like, I, that's my secondary team. I'm a Sharks guy, but that's my secondary team. Whenever the Sharks season's over, it's all right, cool. I'm from the South. I had to rock with something in the Southeast. Big Canes. I got to watch them play against the Devils in the playoffs last year. It was absolutely amazing. My first ever hockey playoff game. I just started watching hockey last year, so it was super sick. What's your off season look like?
Yeah, definitely a lot of Canes games, a lot of Panthers games. I've been a fan since I was since I was born, basically. And Canes are a little bit newer thing that I got into probably about the start of my fandom was 2022 when NASCAR sent me to one of their games, and I was like, you know what, ice hockey is actually pretty cool. And so I've just been slowly watching them more and more and more. And man, like it is hard to match the vibe of like a really good like ice hockey playoff game. Like it is, the energy is incredible. So, but yeah, I also will go to as many Panthers games as I can get to. I was so proud of the progress that they made, and I have never heard uh, B of A stadium be so loud in my entire life when they were competing against the Rams. So it was really cool because Charlotte has been the Panthers have been a little bit guilty of having a fair weather fan base for a while. And so to see everybody kind of show up and show out was awesome, even when things were not quite going right. So
Happy to see my boy Bryce Young over there doing his thing. I just hope he just keeps developing, keeps getting better, man. I want the Panthers to be good. Unfortunately, I'm a Falcons fan. It kind of sucks, but
and it's
yeah,
not too late to change, man.
it honestly isn't because like I'm from Alabama, a big Bama guy. So like for the most part, my NFL fandom is just I watch the Alabama players all over the place, and then like I guess I claim the Falcons just because it's the closest team. I guess the
Yep.
the Titans, but I don't like anything that comes out of Nashville.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I dude, that's cool. Any outside of the sports side, what do you like to do in the off season? Like, you like to kick it, do some chill stuff. I heard you big into airplanes and whatnot, stuff like that.
Yeah, I have. I've been kind of getting additions to my pilot's license on and off since I got it a couple years ago. So I got my seaplane rating a couple years ago at a place called Jack Brown's Seaplane Base in I think it's Winter Haven, Florida. That was one of some of the most fun flying I've ever done. I'm about to start my IFR license after this. So flying has been one of those things that I've been pleasantly surprised by because it's just you know I've ridden on airplanes my entire life going to races or going to wherever, and so to actually take the reins and fly the airplane myself is actually really cool, and it unlocks a lot of doors for you because I can there's plenty of places that I can go to way quicker than I can driving, and it's just way more convenient to fly. So, definitely looking forward to when I have my IFR license and I don't have to worry about bad weather. And so that's one of my passions. I'm also a big STEM guy. Love science, technology, at least used in the right ways. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
um, but yeah, so I got my degree in mathematics a couple years ago from UNC Charlotte. I basically had the principle of if I'm full time racing, I'm gonna take off from school and focus on that. And if I'm part time in racing, I'll finish my degree. And so because of all that back and forth, it took me a while to get my degree, but better late than never.
Dude, well, I mean, I know it's been a couple of years, but congratulations on that. That's a huge accomplishment. Lots of folks, go pro and things. Are just like, it's cool. Nah, don't care. I don't care. So, huge props to you on doing that. Super cool that you like to fly. Big airplane guy myself. I've always been a nerd with that. My dad's an aerospace engineer. Just being in the Huntsville area, you see lots of cool aircrafts. Like we've got the Saturn V sitting at the entrance to our city, and there's a SR-71 Blackbird sitting right next to it. So like, it's always been really cool to see stuff like that. So just to hear that you fly is like mad cool. It's not necessarily like the I guess the hardest thing to get into because lots of people have started to realize like, yo, if you have the time, you can get your pilot's license. But to see someone, as a busy as a guy as you are, go out and do that is really cool. Have you flown to any events or anything? You flown yourself to any races?
I did fly myself to a sponsor appearance one time in Richmond Raceway. My sponsor, Superior Essex, has a suite right next to the garage, and I have never quite liked that drive to Richmond just because it's kind of there's not a whole lot in between. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take this 5 hour drive and I'm gonna turn it to an hour and 25-minute flight. And so it was awesome to do that, and I got to practice a little night flying in the process. And so one of my bucket list items though has always been to fly myself to Daytona for the season opener. So fingers crossed that happens next year.
Dude, that would be so sick. That would be so sick. But I know you're running out of time, so I'm not gonna take up too much of your time. I appreciate you for your time and everything, and wanted to talk with me. Obviously, you have not much of an introduction to who I am and anything, but I've learned lots about you and everything, and I can't wait to continue to follow your career, follow motorsports and everything. Like you've like put so much into my head and so much about like the behind the scenes stuff, and I'm even more hyped to continue to watch the races, knowing like, yeah, there's like hundreds of thousands of hours that have gone into this with people like just sitting back and studying tape, studying this, studying that. The game of inches, which is like super cool to me, and it's just like it's so fascinating. Like it really is, and people just think it's just hop in a car, turn left, go fast, and it's like no, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people that were involved in this, and it's not just that person that went out and won the race. There's an entire team behind them, and then honestly, behind that team, there was a team behind that team too. Like there's a lot of people involved that may not get the credit, may not get the shine, but at the end of the day, you, the driver, you will always give your respect. You'll always love, the people behind you. So I think that's really cool about the sport, especially just hearing you talk about it. I can tell how much respect you have for everybody involved with what you do. It's not just about you; it's about everybody involved, and that's just like absolutely beautiful to me.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you number one for having me, and number two, last thing I'll leave you with is I have that respect because when I was in high school, I worked at Joe Gibbs Racing. I started off as an intern in the fab shop and worked my way up to building and tearing down cars and worked in almost every single department in that race shop. And so I really got a firsthand perspective on the amount of work that goes into this and how much family time that some of these guys end up sacrificing because of this sport. And so it's a tough game, but you make those guys feel appreciated and they'll do anything for you. And so it's one of my favorite parts of the sport. But appreciate you having me. And for anybody who is listening to this, make sure to follow Trailer Park Sports Network.
I really appreciate you, my guy. You have a good one.
You too.